This is Fred Beck from Fred Talks Fighting. Today, I'm very lucky to be joined by the managing editor of Rig Magazine, Tom Gray. So thank you very much for coming on, Tom. It's good to see you, mate.
You're welcome. Good to see you, pal.
So I was watching some of the interviews you've previously done on YouTube before this, and what I found quite cool was the fact that you're very lucky to have met Muhammad Ali back in the day. And that's something that not a lot of people can say. How did you come about that?
It was a long time ago, 1994, so I'd have been 19 at the time. I became a boxing fan just maybe 2 or 3, like not hardcore. I became a Muhammad Ali fan a couple of years prior to that and had started getting these fights on like bootleg. It was VHS video back in the day. I don't know if you're even old enough to remember that. But you would send, in Boxing News or Boxing Monthly, you would send away and you would get his fights in, and I was reading as many books as I could on him, either buying them or reading them at the local library. And then it was one of my mates had seen in the newspaper, and it was very, very small, which is, looking back, it's kind of bizarre, but it was a very, very small thing in either the Daily Record or the Sun or something, saying Muhammad Ali was doing this tour, and it listed a bunch of cities, and Glasgow was included. And it was Waterstone's bookshop in Glasgow. And it was, I think, the following, from memory, like the following week. So I just went in on the train and, and waited. I mean, I waited there all day, but like I could have waited twice as long and I still would have stayed.
And this was in Scotland?
Yep, Glasgow. But he'd also, it was a book. I could have had the book out for you, actually. I'd need to do some digging to get it. But it was a book that was compiled by his photographer, Howard Bingham, who he'd known since, I guess, the very, very early 60s. And Bingham had charted his career from the Olympic days, or maybe not the Olympics, but certainly very early pro, all the way up to, it was like the present day. So post-retirement, that period that then followed. And that's essentially what it was. It was a picture book. I mean, it had a big introduction at the beginning by Reg Guttridge. But other than that, it was just these classic shots of Ali with like in fights or with Malcolm X or with Elvis Presley or all the people that was around his whole life. And I never bring it out and have a look through it. He's got his autograph in it, but I can just remember it. I don't take it out and look through it because I don't want it damaged.
Okay, so that must have had the picture of him when he's got his arm out like that with the Beatles in.
Yes, it does. It had that exact picture in it because, again, Bingham had so much intimate access that and he's a great photographer, that he had most, or not most, because there's all sorts of photographers that get classics of Ali, but he had them through that whole 20-year career and beyond. So it was probably hard for him actually to take the photographs that he had and make a book out of it, because he could have probably made 5 or 6 books, but it was just this one. It was called the 30-year journey. It was called. That was what the name. If you look it up, you'll find it. I think Ali's on the front. He's lying down, and I think it's a shot from when he's in Africa. But it was a popular book at the time. But I think you had to buy the book as well to get into to meet him, which makes sense. And there's a autograph on it from Ali and an autograph on it from Bingham as well.
Wow, that's crazy. I remember I was walking past this shop and they had loads of photos in it, and they had that picture of him and the Beatles. And I thought, well, it's a canvas photo, so we're what, £30-40. And I asked how much it was, and about £500-600. Like, wow, that's a strange. Price range.
That book that I bought was 20 quid back in the day. So it was like 20 quid, and that was it autographed. You didn't pay any more than that. What was really cool at the time was that because you're in a queue, you're waiting so long, and it's all Ali fans that are there, right? So you ended up talking to people, and I met this fella, and he said, "Have you got a camera with you?" And I said, "No." And he said, "You've came to meet Muhammad Ali and you've not got a camera?" And I said, "To be honest, it never crossed my mind." And this is long before the days of I don't even think you'd have digital cameras then. Certainly didn't have mobile phones, cell phones. But he had just a small camera, and he took shots of me with Ali and posted them, and I didn't even know this guy, which was really nice. So I've got it. It's not the best of pictures of me, but at least it doesn't really matter what I look like as long as Ali's in the photo, right?
Yeah, it doesn't matter what anyone looks like as long as Ali's there. There's no one else you met I saw the photo on Instagram quite recently. It's new, undisputed, your fellow countryman's Josh Taylor. Obviously, you're probably delivering him the Ring Magazine belt. But what's it like meeting Josh Taylor as well? Because he had that excellent win over Ramirez and Rage's Progress. What was that like seeing Josh? Because Scotland has a new undisputed world champion.
Well, I go way back with Josh. The first time I met Josh Taylor, he hadn't even turned pro. He was in the World Series of Boxing at the time, which is it's almost like the transitional period. If you're going to do it, if a fighter's going to do it, if an amateur goes to the World Series of Boxing, it's what they do before they turn over pro. And Josh was in that at the time, the World Series of Boxing, and he was over in Steps, which is in Scotland, sparring with Ricky Burns. That's the first time I ever met him. And then I met him again. He was a guest of Sugar Ray Leonard's in Ayr. He was like at a top table with Sugar Ray Leonard. And he was just making his move at that time to turn pro. And I remember speaking to him and his dad. And I said, oh, Josh, once you've had 4 or 5 fights, I'd like to interview you for Ring Magazine. We do something called New Faces. I said, I just want you to get a small run of pro fights and then we'll do that. And he's like, yeah, absolutely. But what I hadn't counted on at the time, it's amazing looking back, is how quick he would move. It was almost like when I get the idea into my head to do a New Faces on him, he was already fighting Dave Ryan for the Commonwealth Championship. And then right after that, he was quickly onto the world scene. It was Victor Postol. And, so I've known him for that long. And I've also, I was covering Josh before he was the star that he's become now. So it doesn't feel weird. Josh is a guy that I can just go up and speak to. What I am always appreciative of is the access that he gives me. I mean, you can't buy that. And that Josh didn't need to allow me to come up to the house to sit and watch the Ramirez fight recently or any of that. Obviously, when I was giving him a belt, he was delighted to get me up. But he's always been so accommodating all through his career, not just now, but going all the way back to he was at the embryonic stages of his pro career.
I mean, Josh's last load of opponents, their record here, I think it's the last 6 opponents, so a combined record of 136-1 and 1 loss. That's crazy, isn't it?
Yep.
And so if we move on kind of past the boxes to Ring Magazine is where you work. What I want to know, you got quite a lot of editors there. You got managing editor, which you are yourself, editor-in-chief, and associate editor. So what's the difference between all of those? Because that's quite confusing, I found out.
Right, okay. Yeah, I mean, look, when I was made, so that's the one. I mean, the editor-in-chief, right, is my boss, who's Doug Fisher. So he's commander-in-chief in effect. He's in charge. When I was made associate editor, to be honest, I didn't know what it was. It just sounded good. The jump to managing editor, I'm a lot more involved now in how to delegate stories, both for the website and for the magazine. So in other words, just let's talk about the magazine specifically. When you're going to do a magazine, you need to decide what has to go in it. Then you need to decide who is best for each story. So the pool of writers that we use, or it might be brand new writers. You need to establish how you're going to fill that book and lay it out exactly how it appears in the one you've got in front of you just now. That's the end product. So I'm a lot more involved in that process, the process of story allocation, the actual stories that have been written than I was previously, if that's making any sense whatsoever. And the same kind of applies to the website, but that's a lot more up to date because you need to be aware of the fights that are coming up the next weekend, and a wee bit before that, try and track fighters down for pre-fight advances, who's going to be attending fights live. You need to be aware of who's going to be where. If we can't get someone there live, who's covering it from television. So a lot of it is to do with handling, certainly in the managing editor role that I'm in just now, is making sure that the ship runs smoothly. I mean, I might have explained that quickly, but there's a lot of pitfalls there. I mean, if you forget something, or you're not aware of something, or you forget a fighter's appearing on an undercard and we should have spoke to him, there's a lot of time that's devoted to that. I don't get writing now anywhere near as much as I used to because I'm so busy with that. I mean, even today, our next issue will be a Julio Cesar Chavez special. And I've kind of spearheaded that and selected the stories that we want written, and then I bounced off Doug, and Doug gave me ideas on who should be writing what. We were speaking to Chavez's agent, his public relations guy last night, and seeing what we could get from Julio Cesar Chavez himself. And and then the story's all been allocated and sent out, and then there's deadlines set, and that's the kind of thing that I'm doing most of at present.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. Do you find yourself doing many interviews anymore, or not too much?
I still do them. I like to keep. It's funny. It is like when I look back on it, when I started taking my career seriously, like I was doing so much small hall stuff between Glasgow and Edinburgh, and I loved it. I loved grassroots boxing at the time, because it's great to see the rise of a professional. I don't get doing that at all now. Because of the pandemic and whatnot, I've not covered a fight. The last fight I would have covered would have been Callum Smith and John Ryder, which I think is December 2019. So I've not even been doing that, but I'll be back to that in the very near future. But writing wise, yeah, there's some that I'll go after. I just like to keep my. It's funny. It's almost like a fighter to a degree. If you don't keep writing, if you don't keep doing it, you become rusty. Like things that you would churn out really, really quickly, when you're busy, it takes you longer, and you notice it. So it's good to. I'll be doing a feature for the Chavez issue. Excuse me, maybe two. So I like to keep my my nose in there just to make sure that I'm not getting too rusty. I'm not a good enough writer. I'm not a good enough writer to be rusty.
It's kind of like being a boxer and staying active, though, having ring rust.
That's it. Yeah, it's like anything else. That's like anything else.
And what I really want to know is, Ring Magazine, they famously have their Ring Magazine belt, and they have their Ring Magazine rankings as well. How do you decide who's number 1 and who's number 10 in the ranking system? Is that by you? Because I know the UFC, they don't actually do their own rankings. It's all like the press and media who do it for them. How does it work in Ring Magazine?
Right. I mean, I don't know. Say that again. So the UFC do what?
So the UFC, they don't actually do their own rankings. It's another. I'm not sure who does it. I think it's like a load of media staff. They do the rankings for the UFC. But who does the rankings for Ring Magazine?
Right. Okay. Basically, what we've got is a ratings panel, and there's about a dozen people on that, and not all of them contribute to Ring Magazine. Some do, some don't. Some contribute to completely separate outlets, or whether that be websites. Like they're all around, so all scattered all around the globe. And there's about a dozen. So when fights happen predominantly over the Friday and Saturday night. Now you had Kostya boy Tim fighting yesterday. That'll be in the next rankings rollout. Come this Sunday, one of the ring contributors, Anson Wainwright, who's he's in Wales. He sends out a ratings update, and Anson offers his opinions on here's what's happened over the course of the weekend. Here's what I think. Here's where I think people should go based on the results. And then the rest of the group come in and either say, yes, Anson, you're spot on, or no, Anson, you're full of shit. Let's do this instead. And basically out of that, what you've got with this back and forth is it's like a democracy, so to speak. So if you have, let's take a fighter like Canelo Alvarez for the sake of it, and out of the dozen people, 9 come in, and out of those 9, 6 say Canelo to number 1, Canelo will go number 1. And and that's essentially the way that it works. You've only got 1 to 10, right? And you just basically slot in there. What we do also that's different from governing bodies is governing bodies have got the tendency to, not all the time, but if a fighter loses, they've just lost, that's it, end of story. Whereas we look at it like if a fighter performs very, very well in defeat, then we'll still give them credit for that. Also, if a fighter, like the best example I can think of is the draw between Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder, which I believe personally was a bogus draw, and so did most people. Tyson Fury went over Deontay Wilder in the Ring Magazine ratings because nobody believed certainly nobody believed that Deontay Wilder won the fight, and very few believed that a draw was a fair result. So yeah, we tend to have our own decision process on that, because I think it's a smart way to go. But yeah, in answer to your question, it's a democratic vote that decides it, and not every week, but most weeks, we provide a ratings update, which includes quotes from all the panel members. Like if you type into Google Ring Magazine ratings update, you'll get a history of them, and you'll be able to read for yourself exactly what's went down.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. That's quite a good way. Democracy to do it. It's kind of like voting for prime minister in a way, but who's a pound for pound number one and who's top of the division.
Yep.
You recently announced the Ring Magazine that the Ring Magazine belt will be on the line for Pacquiao Spence, which I think's sometime in
Yep.
August. And
Yep.
I understand why I do this, because Spence and Crawford, I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. And I think Pacquiao's number 3 in the Ring Magazine rankings.
Yep.
So you've got the belt on for that fight. Who do you think comes out on top for that fight, or you're not allowed to say?
Oh no, I can tell you. I'll tell you anything you want to know. But look, I wrote Manny Pacquiao off. You know, no, I never wrote him off. I thought he was going to lose to Keith Thurman. I really did. I felt as if age, wear and tear would catch up with him. I feel the same again. And I think that Errol Spence is a better fighter than Keith Thurman. I think Errol Spence can fight the kind of fight at this point that will give Pacquiao real trouble in terms of Pacquiao likes to close the gap quickly and get off. Excuse me. I think Spence can keep him from doing that. They just, flicking out a jab at him and keep him honest and control him. I don't think he'll stop him. I've seen a few people say that Spence will get the stoppage. I see it going 12 rounds, but I think he'll win convincingly, and I think Manny will get busted up. I'd love to see Manny Pacquiao win it. I just think he's got to run out of juice at some point.
And do you think if this?
I said that last time.
Yeah, no, you never know. That's the thing, Manny Pacquiao. You never quite know. Do you think win or lose, this might be his last fight?
I think conceivably it's his last fight either way. I mean, if he wins that, it would be a remarkable victory. A lot of people saying that it could justify him as the greatest fighter that's ever lived. I think that's a heavy call, but I wouldn't blame people for saying that. A loss, particularly a decisive loss, where does he go from there? I think that would probably be it. But he can't really lose because, as in, if he retires on the back of a victory, then it's arguably the best mic drop in boxing history. If he retires on a loss, whether it be brutal or close, he rolled the dice. There's the fact that a man that's 42 years old with a 20-odd year career behind him, with 8 divisional world titles, 3 Ring Magazine championships, he's just phenomenal. So even if it's a bad loss, he can't lose. His legacy is rubber stamped for all time. He's a great fighter. I mean, I've never interviewed him, seen him live once against Ricky Hatton, and he's incredible. But no, I don't think he ultimately can lose here. He paid the cost for a sensational career, and I wish him all the best in the fight and beyond. He's been a terrific ambassador for the sport.
When it comes down to the GOAT conversation, it's very hard to pinpoint people and their careers, and when you compare resumes, that stuff gets quite complicated. And do you know if the WBA belt, would you know if he'll get reinstated as a WBA world champion for that fight?
Do I know if he has been?
Yeah, do you know if he will be or has been?
Well, I seen that it was Mike Coppinger reported that there was going to be I found this quite funny. There was going to be a board meeting to decide whether or not Pacquiao should be reinstated. So, knowing the way governing bodies work, essentially this board of directors at the WBA are going to sit down and decide whether they want the massive sanctioning fee that will come with a WBA super title fight or not. So I'll leave it up to you what you think is going to happen. If the fact that they're saying they're going to a meeting to discuss it tells me the decision's already made. Sorry, but that's my opinion. That's not the opinion of Ring Magazine.
Yeah, I understand the WBA. I don't know. I wouldn't call it like ruining or spoiling boxing, but I find it very annoying the fact they bring out so many different belts. The super champions, the regular champions, the gold champions. I mean, what do you think about that? Do you think there's too many? I personally think there's too many belts in boxing now. I don't mind the or the WBC, WBA, IBF. I don't mind that, but when they start bringing the super and interim, I find that a bit annoying. But what do you think?
Well, I mean, I've made my feelings on the WBA regular quite clear recently. I'm against it. It cheapens the term world champion. I mean, and it's just getting more and more diluted. So the WBA regular, I think, is a nightmare. It's not like we're silly. You can see the reasons for it. Like they're basically, it's more sanction fees, more money. Like I admit, put it this way, I wouldn't name the fighter, but I sat with a fighter in London who actually was WBA regular champion at the time. And he said, I've got no respect for this title, but I take it because it's an extra zero or two on my purse. And, if I'm going to get extra money, then I'd be a fool not to take it. He was prouder of his Ring magazine ranking at the time than he was of the actual championship that he carried. So I think that's not, I'm a writer or an editor, right? That's not me talking, that's a fighter saying it. And it's a business, essentially. The networks will like to say to promoters, look, we like this fight, but we'd like a title to be on the line so we can advertise it as a world title fight, so we get the numbers so that people want to watch it. And then off of that, you get things like sponsorship and advertising and all that kind of thing comes in. So it's easy to see why they're doing it, but it's ruining the tradition of what a world champion is. I mean, 4 world titles, like you just said, right, we're accustomed to, are 4 sanctioning organization titles and the real champion, which is the Ring Magazine champion. That's what we say. So to Ring Magazine, there's world title holders and there's the champion. That's where Ring Magazine operate. That I can just about handle, but I'm against WBA regular and I'm against WBC franchise. I mean, that's been another one that's just created mass confusion. And then you just wonder now, though, someone said to me recently on Twitter that the WBA regular has been around for 20 years, and I need to be, and I can remember it. I can remember one of the first fights for it, and I couldn't believe it had been that long. But the fact that it's been around that long, Fred, essentially, you're not going to get rid of it. It's been there too long now. That was the realization when I heard it had been around that long, that it's here to stay. Unfortunate, but yeah, I mean, in answer to your question, I've got no time for it at all.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I didn't know it's been around for 20 odd years. And I remember seeing a video that went viral for all the boxing platforms. I think it was about a year ago when Floyd Mayweather, I think it was at the Tank Davis and the Leo Santa Cruz media workout, and he was having a go all sanctioning bodies about all the regular belts of super champions. But then his fighter Tank, he's regular WBA champion. And then when Josh Taylor fight got brought up to Leonard Ellaby, he didn't really want anything to do with it, which I feel a bit annoying in a way.
Yeah, I mean, you can see the way it's. I mean, promoters, regardless of how wholesome they try to be when they come into the game, just end up, contradicting themselves hand over fist. That's been going on forever. Excuse me. So the way Leonard Ellaby, I like Leonard Ellaby. He's no offense to him, but it suits him when you talk Josh Taylor. It suits him to bring up, well, Tank's doing these numbers on pay-per-view, or Tank's filling this arena, right? If Leonard Ellaby promoted Josh Taylor, it would be talking about the Undisputed. You'd be talking about the Undisputed. It doesn't suit him to bring that up because he knows as well as you and I who the junior welterweight champion of the world is. Make no mistake about it. But he needs to promote what he's got, and what he's got in Tank Davis is, a speedy, powerful, exciting, puncher, that's out there, that's super popular, that people want to see, that's got the potential to be transcendent if things keep going the way they're going. He's got that. That's what he's going to promote. What he doesn't have is a junior welterweight champion of the world, so there's just no point talking about it. And it was funny. The only mistake he made was he was talking about how Josh Taylor only filled 1,000 people at the Virgin Hotel Las Vegas. Right, a couple of points here. Number one, Josh Taylor was fighting away from home. It was on the West Coast. It's Ramirez part of town. Plus there was COVID restriction. Plus Josh Taylor's fans couldn't travel to the fight. So why you're even mentioning that is insane. If you bring Tank Davis to Easter Road or Edinburgh Castle, if anything like that ever comes off. We'll see how big the crowd is then, you know. So Leonard Ellerby can only promote what he's got. And like I say, he's got a terrific fight on Tank Davis. I think he's pure class, but he's not the junior welterweight champion of the world. And aside from that, excuse me, he's not the lightweight champion of the world either. I mean, that's the funny thing about it with the regular title. We're at a stage where Showtime and others are calling Tank Davis a 3-weight world champion, and to Ring Magazine, he is a 3-time 1-weight world champion because we don't recognise WBA regular. So you can see how silly things are getting there.
And adding even more wood to the fire was when Floyd said that he wouldn't be fighting anyone outside the PBC banner, which really
yeah, I mean, like, do you know what it is? Some of them are more up for making fights out with their own nucleus, so to speak, than others. Floyd Mayweather is so outspoken and loquacious and bombastic and ballsy. He'll just turn around and say, "I'll say what I like. I'll just tell you it's not happening and get on with it." Like that's Floyd's MO. He's just coming out with, like, you know, how often does, for example, would Top Rank go out of their way to work with the PBC? Right? Doesn't happen. The only difference is Bob Arum won't just turn around and say it. It's just the way it is, right? Floyd's turned around and said that. I don't think he's done himself any favours. I think it's pretty silly. And also, you wonder what trajectory. Let's say, you know, that Tank Davis is staying at 140 pounds. If you're staying within the PBC, yeah, I mean, I don't deny there's attractive fights to make. The Mario Barrios fight was a good fight. But you're essentially going to get kept away from all the fighters that people want to see, whether that be Haney or Ryan Garcia. I know these guys are at lightweight, but these are the guys that you're Tiafimo. These are the fights that people want to see. To turn around and say, "No, we're not giving you that," I think he's got confidence in his core audience, because the core audience want to see Tank Davis fight now. Like, you know, he's not anywhere close to like Floyd was, or De La Hoya was, or Canelo is, but he's still big enough to be getting put on pay-per-view, and they're making big events out of it. Yeah, he's confident enough that it's a good enough business to keep things as they are, but the people that are suffering from that is the fans. That's ultimately that's the problem.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are starting to notice it now. I mean, the Leo Santa Cruz win, that was a fantastic win, but you gotta fight the main guys. At least you can have maybe fight one good guy. I sound like a catcher now. One good guy 1 year, and the two others can be C-class opponents, A-class to C-class. Have like one fight off. Anyway, thank you so much for your time, mate. It's been really good.
You're welcome, Pat. You're welcome. Great speaking to you.
Where can people find you on social media
at? My main, the main one I use is Twitter predominantly. So that's at Tom_Gray_boxing.
Perfect. I'll put that link in the description. All right, Tom. Thank you so much for your time.
All right, man. Brilliant. Great speaking to you. Take care.